A new season is coming soon, so that means Riot has to rework the jungle yet again. Apparently the logic here now is that Riot hates it when people figure out a system for the game, so they purposely alter it to whip up chaos and make it different even if it was already working fine. Take that how you will. Anyhow, we were just given last night an idea of what they have in store for the jungle, and this may only be a fraction of the changes. Riot plans on removing the buffs from the monsters that you get after smiting them, because apparently it was obvious which ones were the better ones, and adding something called plants that grow randomly throughout the jungle. They're neutral and anyone can access them to gain some effect by smacking them. You can see some of them in the background footage loop I have going in the background. Riot is doing this because they feel the jungle became too standard fare, where players are simply playing optimally and no variance in their pathing was ever taken. They're hoping this makes it so players are encouraged to take reactive tactical maneuvers and such. To be fair, I fail to see what randomly spawning plants has to do with tactical depth other than luck or random convenience, and won't end up just being a see and take situation. You could also see in one of the clips that the Raptor camp was changed as well. Riot plans on making jungle camps suit different types of junglers, in this case an AoE clear, in order to encourage different types of junglers to exist. Historically, this has never worked because you can't make a jungle that suits multiple types of junglers that one type just doesn't end up abusing more than the other. If you need an example, just remember Gromp being released as the Grey Wraith as an option for single target champions, when it ended up just being more fuel for hardcore farmers. Anyhow, so far we have 3 types of plants being introduced. The honey fruit plant will drop a number of what I will call mangoes that will heal you for a bit, although apparently slow you too. The blast cone plant is basically a satchel that you can attack to launch yourself and anyone around away from the blast radius. Scryer's bloom is the third plant, which is basically a clairvoyance effect around the plant when you smack it. However, aside from some skepticism I already gave, I'll try to be open-minded about these plants. There are some smart decisions that Riot is taking with these plants in that they will spawn in set locations based on what type of plant they are. The healing one, for example, will spawn only in the river and some random location in the river. This creates some form of predictability, although the spawning is still purely random. They also do give both teams a 30-second warning before they spawn, so technically they can't surprise you that much, but they can still likely reach some form of unfairness depending on how accessible it is to some champions. After reading more about the plants, they don't seem as terrible as I initially thought, but they still sound like they'll be gimmicky and dumb more than anything else. At one spectrum, the plants will spawn poorly and meaningless and thus have little to no effect. On the complete other side, plants will spawn that will completely warp a situation in some circumstances that will make it feel like you were robbed of careful advantage. It is most definitely some form of catch-up mechanic that Riot is inserting to allow comebacks to occur, which is unfair to teams that are dominating their opponents, although at the same time it can allow map-controlling teams to utterly dominate a bit more. If anything, it's like a quasi-mini objective that players will have to sort of fight over. If the effect isn't that big, most players will just kind of ignore it. As I said earlier, Riot hates it that pathing was figured out and the optimal routes were the only ones taken, with moments of switching it up sometimes occurring for surprise playmaking. As someone who really likes the jungle, this is a huge spit in the face by Riot. It's like telling us that it's terrible that we bothered to learn our role, formulate hard strategies, and be mathematical and precise about everything. They instead just want us to purely rely on the whims of randomness and wing everything. So to be fair to the plans, my qualms are less with them and more with Riot. I'll take my wait and see stance with the plants because while the RNG nature and gimmick of them is already just flat out dumb, their impact is still rather up in the air. Also, because a lot of people in the Reddit comments kept glossing over it, I'll repeat myself. They spawn with a 30-second warning to both teams, or at least appear visually on the map, and you can likely see where they are and sort of plan around them to some extent, but the fact that they exist to either screw you completely or do nothing in ridiculous variance is terrible. Again, I personally kind of see them as dumb and pointless, mostly because the system we have for the jungle right now is working rather fine. It's mostly just the jungles themselves being rather problematic. So I'm just kind of hesitant and skeptic about, the reasoning for this. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below as to whether you don't mind them being in the game or you agree with most Redditors that it is a pretty terrible idea.